tariffs on canola came up unexpectedly. If they can come on fast, then come off fast. And the Chinese are just going to want something in return.
This is something that the Prime Minister has been looking at. That being said, when it comes to EVs, you saw what we announced. First and foremost, we said that we would be lifting the ZAV mandate.
Just a few days ago, President Donald Trump renewed his call for allies to stand with the United States and punish China with higher tariffs. In his vision, Canada should act like a loyal soldier, following Washington's lead no matter the cost. Ottawa did not answer directly. Instead, it sent a very different signal. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government is now considering rolling back the 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, a tariff that was originally designed to keep pace with Washington. This move looks like a bucket of cold water thrown straight into Trump's face. While he praises America first and expects others to fall in line, Canada is showing that it is ready to step out of America's shadow to defend its own economy. The shift is not accidental. It comes after China retaliated with tariffs that crushed Canada's canola industry, a backbone of prairie agriculture. Farmers in Saskatchewan, the heartland of canola, are being squeezed. On one side, Ottawa's tariff wall on Chinese EVs. On the other, Beijing's 76% duty on canola imports imposed in mid-August. For farmers, this is not abstract geopolitics. It is a simple question of survival. Can they sell their harvest without losing money? When Premier Scott Moe returned from his mission to China with a message of more constructive talks than expected, it confirmed the pressure on Ottawa to shift course.
The EV tariff was first introduced to shield Canada's auto sector and align with Washington's strategy against Beijing. But the cost has been severe. Beijing struck back by targeting canola, one of Canada's most valuable farm exports. With duties near 76%, farmers now face the prospect of selling their harvest below production cost. Scott Moe's trip to Beijing provided a rare opening. He met directly with the officials who imposed the tariffs and described the discussions as unexpectedly positive. When he returned, Carney publicly thanked him, a gesture that showed Ottawa now sees the crisis for prairie farmers as urgent as protecting auto workers. Canada is stuck in a trade-off that pits crops against cars, and the balance can no longer hold.
In Ottawa, the tone is clearly shifting. Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly has acknowledged the government is reviewing the EV tariff and exploring new imports from Japan, South Korea, and Europe. That is a clear departure from the firm stance of earlier months. On the Chinese side, the revival of the Joint Economic Trade Commission after 7 years shows Beijing is willing to re-engage. Premier Moe reported the Chinese officials expressed a readiness to look forward rather than back. These developments suggest the two sides are testing ways to recalibrate their trade relationship, not only on canola, but in a broader framework. If Canada removes the EV tariff, the immediate effect would be relief for farmers. China could ease its duties, restoring access to a premium market that Canadian producers rely on. Consumers would benefit from cheaper electric vehicles, though domestic manufacturers would face new competition. Ottawa could also seize the chance to demand that Chinese automakers build plants in Canada, creating jobs and strengthening supply chains. The political dimension is equally important. On the surface, this looks like a direct snub to Trump, who has urged Ottawa to join his tariff wall against Beijing. But in practice, it is more about pragmatism than open defiance. Canada cannot afford to sacrifice its farm economy simply to stay in Washington's good books, especially when Trump's own tariffs continue to hit Canadian metals, lumber, and energy exports. By recalibrating, Canada is signaling that it will defend its own workers and industries first. It is not abandoning the United States, but it is refusing to blindly follow. In today's fractured global economy, such independence may be the only way for Canada to navigate between two superpowers without losing its footing at home.
John Deere is struggling under the weight of President Trump's economic policies. The American icon is down 29% from last year.
So the point is that with all these doggone tariffs that the president has put on, it's increased the cost of new equipment. It costs more for the farmer to buy.
Across the American heartland, farmers are living through a crisis that is not of their making. When President Trump expanded tariffs in 2025, the stated goal was to bring manufacturing and jobs back home. Instead, the first people to feel the strain have been farmers. John Deere, the most recognizable name in farm equipment, reported losses of $300 million this year and warned of another $300 million by the end of 2025. The company's stock has dropped nearly 30% compared to last year, and more than 200 employees have been laid off. For farmers, every broken part or delayed machine is now more expensive, while their crops sell for less abroad. This is the starting point of today's story, one that contrasts sharply with how Canada has chosen to respond.
Because of the trade and the tariffs, a lot of our customers have said, the heck with the United States, we're not buying your commodities anymore. So things like hard red winter wheat are at an all-time low for the amount of price we get at the farm gate.
The daily math on a farm has become brutal. Import tariffs have disrupted the supply of tractor bearings, fertilizer, and chemicals. Costs rise each season, squeezing budgets already stretched thin. At the same time, export markets are closing off. Hard red winter wheat now commands one of its lowest prices at the farm gate. Many farmers warn that younger growers without financial reserves will not survive these conditions. When expenses keep climbing while grain prices fall, there is no margin left to invest or even to break even. Even established producers face the risk of going under if this cycle continues. What was meant as an economic strategy to revive American strength has instead put farm families directly in the crosshairs.
We're announcing today that we're acting to protect Canada's agriculture and seafood industries. I'm going to focus on Canadian canola, which has been hit with Chinese tariffs.
North of the border, Prime Minister Mark Carney recently unveiled what he called the most wide-ranging trade resilience package in the country's history. At its center is a new $5 billion Canadian dollar fund designed to help businesses retool, diversify, and remain competitive. The plan includes retraining for 50,000 workers, an extension of employment insurance up to 65 weeks for long-tenured employees, and a streamlined job matching program. Just as significant is the introduction of a binding Buy Canadian policy, requiring federal agencies and crown corporations to prioritize Canadian suppliers when awarding contracts. For agriculture, the measures go even further. With canola exports facing Chinese tariffs and beef and lobster also under pressure, Ottawa pledged $370 million Canadian dollars in biofuel incentives tied to canola production. Loan limits for farmers were raised to $500,000, and new funding was earmarked for international marketing to open fresh outlets. These steps do not eliminate the pain of global tariffs, but they demonstrate a clear attempt to cushion the blow and prepare producers for the next phase of competition. The contrast between these two strategies could not be sharper. In the United States, sweeping tariffs were applied almost overnight, leaving farmers trapped between higher costs and weaker sales. In Canada, the government chose to build a broad safety net while also pushing industries to adapt and diversify. Both countries faced the same global turbulence, but one is forcing its producers to shoulder the burden directly, while the other is spreading that burden through public policy. For farm families on either side of the border, the outcome is deeply personal. In the U.S., uncertainty threatens livelihoods that have lasted generations. In Canada, the government is betting that timely support and structural change will protect rural communities from collapse. The question ahead is whether America will continue on a path that leaves its farmers exposed, or whether it will learn from its neighbors' attempt to match resilience with responsibility.
We're going to bring it from 25% to 50% the tariffs on steel into the United States of America.
The tariffs were initially only expected to hit raw materials, but now they include goods containing steel and aluminum.
President Trump's decision to raise tariffs on steel was meant to showcase economic muscle. By slapping a 50% levy on Canadian steel and aluminum, the White House believed jobs would flood back to American plants. Instead, the policy has set off chain reactions that Washington did not anticipate. In Quebec, Canada's small but growing can manufacturing sector has seen demand surge.
Since steel tariffs between Canada and the U.S. came into effect, this Quebec food can maker has seen its sales more than double.
Before the tariffs, food companies relied almost entirely on American imports. Once the new costs hit, buyers began shifting to domestic supply. Sales doubled within months, and producers are now preparing to expand into Ontario. A new Windsor plant, scheduled to open in January, aims to produce more than 1 billion cans annually by 2028 and create over 100 jobs. Another facility in Hamilton will handle steel finishing that used to be done south of the border. What looks like a small story about cans illustrates a bigger truth. The tariffs meant to punish Canada are helping Canadian industry come back to life.
The tariffs could also impact the price you pay for groceries.
It's going to mean higher canned food prices across the board for American consumers.
The picture is very different in the United States. Manufacturers face higher costs, especially in the auto sector. PACCAR, a major U.S. truck maker, reported in late August that tariffs on steel, aluminum, and copper added $75 million in expenses in the third quarter alone. Meanwhile, Daimler Truck and Trayton, building in Mexico under USMCA rules, sidestepped these costs. Their vehicles can be 3% cheaper than those assembled in America. U.S. steelmakers are also expanding capacity aggressively. According to the Wall Street Journal, new projects will add 21 million tons, roughly a quarter of total American output in 2024. Yet demand from construction and autos remains weak. As a result, American steel has become the priciest in the world, sometimes $400 per ton above global benchmarks. This imbalance is already threatening output. Analysts expect an 11% drop in U.S. vehicle production by 2026 as costs flow through the supply chain. Builders also warn of higher housing and infrastructure costs as tariffs inflate raw material prices. The policy that was supposed to strengthen America is forcing both industry and consumers to pay more.
Aluminum, steel, autos, copper. They happen to have a specific on copper, and then, of course, lumber, softwood lumber, which has been an issue. So those are the areas where immediately we are focused on improving the outcome.
Canada has chosen not to mirror every American move.
In order to do that, we will have to look at other areas where we can have win-win cooperation, other areas.
Instead, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a tariff reset in late August. Ottawa lifted some retaliatory measures on U.S. goods, but kept pressure on strategic sectors such as steel, aluminum, and autos. This approach preserves leverage while creating space for diplomacy. On the ground, Canadian firms are adjusting quickly. Food processors are sourcing cans at home, and Hamilton is preparing to host new steel finishing capacity. These long-term investments will take years to pay off, but they reduce reliance on the United States. Far from being cornered, Canada is using the tariff fight to strengthen domestic industry. Diplomatically, the reset produced immediate movement. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick hosted Canada's Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc in Washington on August 26th for a 90-minute meeting. Officials on both sides described it as constructive. The Americans acknowledged that Canada's removal of some counter-tariffs was a significant step, and discussions are now advancing more quickly. Beyond the negotiating table, Canada holds other forms of leverage. Canadian tourists once accounted for 10 to 15% of daily economic activity in Las Vegas. That flow has nearly disappeared, and businesses have noticed. For Trump, tariffs may be a favorite tool, but his advisors know that the uncertainty surrounding them undermines investment and confidence. This is where the contrast between the two leaders stands out. Trump thrives on disruption, using tariffs to keep partners off balance. Carney favors steadiness, protecting key industries, keeping doors open to negotiation, and supporting firms that turn hardship into opportunity. The steel gamble designed to break Canada is now backfiring at home. while Canada shows it can adapt, endure, and even outplay the United States in the long run.